Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. Well, they are demanding what they say belong to them. But as the economy got the required shocks to absorb this demand or not? Well, I'm talking about the labor front and workers in the country with respect to what has happened in recent times. And what about the current state of the economy and whether indeed has it recovered or not? We have the ability to withstand all the shocks, or there are still a lot of things that we have to do. Well, all these issues and things are wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition as I engaged an economics department of the University of Ghana, Legon, Professor William Bawumia. He's joining me in studio here, and also I'll be joined by the Chief Executive of the Ghana, that is Employer Association, about the current developments that has happened in the economy. The labor economist, the economist, as you analyze issues on the economic front here on PM Express Business Edition. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the economy and development on the labor front. And what about the expected recovery with respect to from COVID-19 shocks? I'm so grateful to have with me the head of the economics department of the University of Ghana, Legon, Professor William Bawumia. And Prof, I appreciate your time so much. Today is a very rough and tough day, but you still made time to join us in Sydney. I do really appreciate it so much. And Prof, how are you doing? It's been quite a long time, Prof.
Well, we have a lot to do in the university, head of department, and you have a lot. I mean, the calendar had been put into 10 weeks instead of 13 weeks of teaching.
Yeah.
And you can't miss one lecture. Even during holidays, you are supposed to go and teach. Otherwise, if you miss one day, it means that you cannot complete the syllabus. Yeah. So it's been quite tough, but we are almost there. Next week, lectures will...
But the department is doing great as well. Some innovations there a little bit as well, you know.
Well, the bottom line is how we can get quality students to come out and help develop the nation.
Economics is not for the faint-hearted, some would say. When it starts level 100, the class is so big. As it moves on, the number declines.
Well, as I tell my students, I think economics is the easiest course in the university, except that you need to be good quantitatively, you need to think logically, you need to be a serious student. You cannot read economics. You need to sit down and calculate, compute, and you need to read articles and so on. So if you're able to do all this and you do you go through your assignment and so on, I think you should be able to get your first class or second class upper easily.
Econometrics.
Well, that's the easiest one anyway.
Prof.
That's the one that I teach, and my students are happy. I mean, when you break them down, they realize that, wow, I think we thought econometrics was difficult, but I think everything is here with us. So it's about the student taking their work serious. I mean, many of the things that we teach them, I mean, you can find them on the net. When we were students, it's difficult to get a book. Sometimes we have one book for, about 1,000 students. But these days, you pick your phone. When I'm teaching and I interpret something and you are not too clear, you can Google and find out. You go to YouTube, it has so many things, resources that are available for students. But unfortunately, we spend our time on other things.
But Prof, thank you so much. And for you, I mean, let's start even first with the economy as well. Last week, the Statistical Service released the GDP data, 5.4. Some are saying that now we are seeing the recovery. Some are saying that it's early days yet. Let's hold on. I mean, for you, what are your thoughts on the GDP numbers and what is happening now? Some are saying that the recovery, we are there. Some are saying that, hold on, we are still almost there.
Well, I'm not surprised because when the COVID struck in 2020, I had opportunity to conduct surveys with Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations to look at how the economy was faring, recovering, and the effect on jobs and wages and so on. And the first one we did in June and July, we realized that the effect on job losses was not that much. And it is because if you take the economy, I mean, the informal sector accounts for about 77%. And then the public sector, where government is supposed to be the employer, government did not lay off any worker. So it means that you have 77% plus about 9%, which is about 86% that you think, well, we're not so much affected. Maybe the private formal sector is where the effect was. And the second one, we realized that I think things were turning around. So I wasn't surprised and I wasn't surprised that we recovered positive growth in 2020 because if you look at our economy, agriculture was not affected so much by the COVID. It was, I mean, the COVID actually affected some areas like hospitality industry, creative industry, and so on. From where I sit, I was not expecting us to have a big problem as far as growth was concerned. So when we got 0.5%, and then I knew that in 2021, if we don't have any lockdown, I think we're going to recover. And I was happy to see that 5.4% overall growth, and the non-oil GDP was 5.7. That makes it even better than what I anticipated.
Prof, I mean, from knowing from where you're coming from and the work that you've done over the years, would you say that we have recovered now? Looking at the numbers and even the various sectoral performance as well?
Well, we are on the path of recovery, and we are recovering faster than what I thought. I wouldn't say we have totally recovered.
Why?
Well, I think we still don't know what will happen. I mean, we cannot discount what is happening in Ukraine.
Ukraine and Russia.
I mean, Russia is a big player when it comes to global economy. And if you look at Ukraine, I mean, they are a source of raw materials, inputs for production of many things that we are thinking about. So there will direct or indirect effect one way or the other. So we have to be cautious. And of course, even though we think that the COVID is almost over, we should not jubilate now. I think we should tread cautiously and not be too much jubilant, but try to go strategically. And I'm sure by a year or two, we can then say that, well, things are okay.
Prof, is it in terms of policy response or at the individual consumption and spending level? Because I knew people who've moved all the way from London to Ghana because they couldn't stand the restrictions in London and they wanted psychologically, some have gone through a lot of problems, and some are saying that being even locked down or restrictions and all those things, now they can even go out and all the rest. Isn't the spending even good for the economy? Or maybe you are talking about the policy response where government might go to sleep and say, listen, we have recovered, hooray, let me go and sleep.
Well, it's a combination of factors. I think Ghana managed the COVID quite well. I mean, we all have the evidence. So, and therefore, we can say that, well, we've done well. And policy responses was also quite good. And that is why you expect that some people from UK will come to Ghana. And we can still continue to do better. And I look at it from the expenditure side. I think that is where government should be very prudent in its expenditure measures. We still have to come up with a very good measure to sustain the fiscal as we have, and then try as much as possible to ensure that we don't overspend, because we are not even sure that we are able to get our revenue target. And therefore, we shouldn't jubilate. As I said, we are doing quite well. We are on the path of recovery. I mean, if it's 100%, maybe we are within the range of 60%. We haven't gotten there yet.
Is it a sign that our economy is increasingly becoming a little bit resilient to shocks, or maybe it is still about the unstructured nature, and I'm sorry for my choice of words when I'm talking to an economist, of the economy itself, that doesn't make us really account or expose some of these challenges within?
Well, sometimes when we have a pandemic like this, we complain. But sometimes on the other side, we get some kind of benefit. You know that imports have slowed down a bit, and those who are in that business will tell you that these days when you want to get things from China, those days that it took a week or two to get it. Now, sometimes it takes about 3 months.
Yeah.
It takes about 6 months. So it means that even though the pandemic has affected us adversely in some areas, it has also slowed down our imports. And it also gives us opportunity to be able to look within. And many things that we think we have to depend on as imports, we can get them here. And that brings me to Ukraine issue. I mean, that is the source of, flour. And if you read about Ukraine, they produce flour a lot. So if we want to get flour from Ukraine and we are not getting it, can we use it as opportunity to create some kind of flour from cassava and so on? So then it becomes a blessing rather than a curse. So all these combined to slow down the effect as it were. And that has actually culminated in where we are. Unfortunately, from January till March, the exchange rate market misbehaved, and that also affected our inflation and so on. So that was the turbulence that we experienced, and I expect that if we are able to tame that by the year ending, I think we should be able to see something positive.
Prof, let me get your thoughts on the current development on the labor front. And some would say that it was expected, or are you shocked, or it's the fact that we've still not, as a country, reached that level where we are paying the right wage for the work done? We will still continue to have some of these disturbances, if I can use that word.
Okay, two things. One, in the labor front, whenever you have inflation misbehaving, and I always use the word misbehaving, especially when inflation started, when we determined the minimum wage for 2022, inflation was, I think, around a single digit or around 11%, and now we are at 19.4%. So then the worker would know that his income is eroding so fast, and therefore they have to come out to ask for more. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I think as a country, we haven't looked at our pay system holistically. And I say this because we seem to address wage issues in a firefighting manner. When we started the single spine in 2010, and everybody will bear me out, that the disparity between those on the single spine and other levels were not that much. And I always put them in, I think, 3 or 4. We have those of us on the single spine, we have those on Article 71, then we have those who are supposed to pay their workers based on what they generate. And then we have others as well. So when we have these differences, and then in 2010, the differences weren't that much. And from 2013, 2014, you see that the gap began to widen so fast that those on a single spine begin to realize that, they are not getting what they want. And when they compare themselves to others, I think they are not better, or they are far, far, far worse than them. Then anytime the inflation begins to behave, then you expect that labor will rise. So I think it's time government looks at our pay system in a holistic manner and try to see how the inter-equity relativities will be bridged, so that at least when you have such a situation, you will not get the pressure as we have now.
But doesn't the backstop put again the ability to pay us? Because I want to push you the war. You have the economic hat, and also you're a worker as well. And how easy or difficult it is that whilst these demands are indeed genuine, there's also the ability to pay and also not to, again, mess up inflation, that you end up getting the money, but it's worthless.
I don't want to be in the shoes of government, but I think I said that there are different pay systems in Ghana. So if somebody on the single spine, let's say, let me take myself as example, a professor who is at the top is supposed to be on 24L. The 24L is equivalent to, let's say, 100 cities. And somebody who is on, let's say, Article 71, the lowest there is around, I'm not saying the actual figure, and it's about maybe 5 times the lowest one. Then you begin to wonder, Is it the same ability to pay that we are thinking about? That's what the worker is going to ask. And that is why I think it is important that we look at the pay system holistically as a country. Because we started with UTAC, and UTAC had legitimate consent.
Yeah.
I don't know whether what we wanted is what we got, but now I think things have subsided, and then CLOSAC have come. I don't think after CLOSAC we will not have another, because we haven't addressed them in a holistic manner. We just look at them, okay, this one comes, we address them, then this one also comes. Well, if you have given into this demand, then we also have it, because we are also having problems here and there. But if we are able to address the pay system holistically, from Article 71 to those who are paid based on their own IGF, up to the single spine, then we'll be able to know where the problem is. And then we'll be able to minimize the gap. And that when there's an issue in terms of inflation going up, those at the bottom will understand that, after all, we are not too different from those at the top.
It might be a good time to bring in, that is Alex Frimpong. He's the Chief Executive of the Ghana Employers Association. What about the employers as well? Do they have the challenge of ability to pay, because they are in the private sector? Mr. Frimpong, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on PM Express Business Edition. How are you doing, by the way?
Well, thank you. Good evening, and good evening to your cherished viewers and listeners.
So, Prof, how you do? I know at the employer's angle as well, some will make a case for government as ability to pay. Private sector, the revenue is good, the bottom line is good. Is it also a big challenge for you to meet the demands of workers in these times?
Well, as you rightly said, the ability to pay would primarily stem from whether or not business are able to get the needed revenue or income that they can use to run the business, and at the same time ensure that employee compensation is also taken care of. So the task of balancing the needs of the business as against the needs of workers
is
now and into the future is a major issue, especially now that we are gradually coming out of the challenges occasioned by the pandemic. So these are very, very difficult times for business.
But Mr. Frimpong, and again, I stand to be corrected, because your members cut across. If I look at the banking sector, the earnings are quite good. And if I look at even some of the companies as well, the numbers are good. So is there a case to be made that when any time workers are demanding what they are due, you have the employer trying to shift the goalpost?
Well, I am not a finance person, neither am I a banker. But to the best of my knowledge, when times are hard, some sectors benefit more than the others. So maybe if you see some good figures from the banking sector, I do not know much about that. Maybe seemingly that may be the case. But altogether, even the banks are suffering, because a lot of businesses that they used to do with, especially industry, manufacturers, traders, has shrunk. And unless and until we're able to fully recover, I'm not sure these figures would be able to give you a correct reflection of what is really happening at the business level.
We are going into another round of engagement to review salaries and within the public sector and even for some private institutions as well. Looking at your current state and from what you've picked up from your members, are you in a good state right now to meet the demands that is coming from the labor front, for instance, that listen, any minimum wage should be above the inflation rate?
Well, the tripartite committee, its rules of engagement have a procedure for determining the national daily minimum wage. As I speak to you now, the technical subcommittee of the tripartite has been put together to work at the various scenarios, looking at the different economic indicators, to bring options to the plenary as to the figures that we could use to negotiate for a national daily minimum wage for 2023. So once the report is ready, the parties will study it and consult their constituents, and the negotiations begin. But primarily, we may want to look at the needs of workers, which is very important. We may also want to look at the economy as a whole, and most importantly, the employer's ability to pay. And per the ILO Convention on minimum wage, these are three very important factors that must come into play when you are discussing a national daily minimum wage. So I appreciate the position or comment taken by organized labor, but they will be subject to negotiations by the parties, and I'm sure we need to ensure that by arriving at a figure, it will be able to sustain businesses in the country. They should be able to ensure that employees are also able to make ends meet. And most importantly, the economy will not be hit so hard that it can distort the macroeconomic environment. So that is the responsibility of the committee to ensure that all these parties are able to have some equilibrium in their expectations.
Mr. Frimpong, maybe not getting so much boxed in the national daily minimum wage, I also wanted to look at a situation where, looking at the current state of employers, is it more of the ability to pay, or, George, we can do a marginal increment, even moving away from the daily minimum wage?
Well, at this stage, it will be very difficult for me to make any comments of this nature, primarily because the subcommittee's work must inform and guide the way we proceed with the discussion. So once the report is before the committee, we will study and consult our constituents, and after that, I'm sure we should be able to really tell you or the public exactly what is going into the negotiation, even when we have reached the conclusion, to be able to explain to the public how we got there. So for now, it will be very difficult for me to base that prejudicial comment.
But I get from you, from your commentary, is that whatever that we do, we should be guided by the current environment, the economy, and ability to pay. And those are some of the clear indicators that you've spoken about.
Yes, this is not, these factors have been there all this while. But in our discourse in this on this subject currently, we have sought to highlight these points more forcefully because of the situation in which we find ourselves now, especially given the challenges we have had with COVID, global issues concerning even Russia, Ukraine, how international maritime industry is also impacting on international trade. All these factors are compounding to give us a signal that we need to tread cautiously in what we do. Because, as Prof rightly said, formerly, if you wanted to even import raw materials from China, it was going to take you 3 weeks or 1 month. Now it can take you 3 weeks or 3 months or even 6 months. And we are told from the business community that the freight is also skyrocketing. So these are very difficult times because we have a responsibility to ensure that businesses become sustainable so that workers can be in employment. And that is the challenge that we have, and that is the responsibility that we must be able to shoulder. Because if at the end of the day we make demands that will collapse businesses, then it means that employment for existing workers will be threatened, and potential employees may also not have the opportunity to work. So that is the responsibility we have. That is the challenge that we have. And I think times of that number, the committee has been able to rise to these challenges. And I'm sure when we conclude the negotiations, we should be able to arrive at a figure that will help all of us in advancing the various objectives that we have.
Mr. Frimpong, from data that we've seen from the Ghana Statistical Service as well, what we are picking up is that the economy is recovering. Obviously, that has impacted positively on your business, right? In terms of recovering and then employment and all those things, or things that are still under some difficulties?
Well, if you look at the macro side, I think the statistical service may be justified in coming to that conclusion. But at the micro level, I can assure you that a lot of the businesses are going through some difficulties, but not as in the 2020, 2021 situation. But it will take time before many businesses are able to get the level of the pre-pandemic era. So maybe between 50-60% recovery is good, but for now we need to really ensure that we're able to organize businesses in such a way that the lessons learned will guide us in ensuring prudence in the way we manage and also stabilize the environment. Because, as I said, if the environment is not good for business, then all of us are going to suffer.
Mr. Frimpong, before I just let you go, I mean, Sunday is May Day, and there are still some workers who are still complaining about conditions of service, not necessarily the money per se. I mean, what do you have to tell these workers out there, and also your message in just wrapping up to these workers out there?
Well, my message to my fellow workers is that we are coming out of a pandemic that has really challenged all of us. And we have been able to work together to stabilize the businesses and gotten out of these critical periods. And lessons learned should be able to help us to do things better so that once we're able to improve productivity and we're able to come back to the pre-pandemic levels and the incomes and revenues of businesses improve, I'm sure all of us are going to gain in the outcome. But most importantly, it calls for attitudinal change. Attitudinal change in how we conduct ourselves, attitudinal change in how we see business, attitudinal change in how we're able to give up our best, become innovative, and also try and ensure that the businesses become sustainable. We need to ensure that we improve on how we dialogue with the various employers, how we can negotiate and ensure that we are able to bring industrial peace in the various enterprises. At the national level, I would commend organized labor for ensuring that we are able to sustain dialogue, negotiations, to ensure that there is peace in the country. Because if we are not able to give the signal of a peaceful industrial relations environment in Ghana, it will really stifle any investment drive that policymakers may want to do. Again, the foreign investors may have the wrong signals, and I'm wondering whether Ghana would potentially become a good business destination for them. But after all, there's a saying that capital goes where it is needed, but stays where it is well treated. So if we're able to have a good IR environment, I'm sure it will be a very good attraction for businesses, also job creation, and our businesses can be sustained so that workers can also have work to do and also get the needed improvement in their conditions of service.
Mr. Alex Frimpong is Chief Executive of the Ghana Employers Association. I appreciate your time so much, and I'm happy May Day in advance to you as an employer. Thank you so much. And Prof, I mean, interesting submission. Some would say that, is it the fact that when it comes to pushing for certain things from the workers' perspective, the employers are, let me use the word, shifting the goalpost, or maybe it could be the reality on the ground, Prof?
Well, as we say in economics, workers are aiming at maximizing their income, and for that matter, their utility. So income is a major element in what makes them satisfied. But the employer wants to maximize profit. So there are competing kind of objectives here. So you expect the employer to look at his capital, his assets, and then also the profit. But the worker will also look at what is coming into his pocket. So the employer will be happy to see productivity go up. And sometimes the worker will also tell you, well, I also need one or two things to be able to work with to increase my productivity, but I need more money. So I am always not surprised that employers will always mention ability to pay, while the worker would think that the employer also has it. But by and large, when it comes to the media, workers will say, well, I don't think we need anything less than 19%, 90.4% rate of inflation. By all means, we need something more than that. And when it comes to the negotiation, tripartite, you realize they are brothers and sisters. And at the end of the day, through negotiation, they will come to amicable solution. And then if you look at minimum wage data from 1960, and especially from the 90s, you will realize that whenever inflation is very high, workers are willing to give up something. So they don't go the full hog when it comes to coming up with the political factor. And if you look at the formula for determining minimum wage in terms of projected inflation, in terms of actual inflation, in terms of productivity and the political factor and other factors, workers are willing to give in. And when it comes to a situation where inflation is also very low, employers are also willing to give something up. So at the end of the day, the two are able to come to what we would say an equilibrium for amicable solution to get a better minimum wage that will sit well with workers and also will sit well with employers.
Bro, from your earlier submission, I got the understanding about the serious disparity. And again, I stand to be educated. Why didn't the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission whole thing address the challenge, in terms of getting fair wages across the public sector?
So Fair Wages is in charge of the single spine, and the act that set them up was supposed to manage the single spine. So they are in charge of everything that happens as far as the single spine is concerned. Fair Wages are not in charge of determining the salaries for Article 71 office holders. Fair Wages are not in charge of determining wages for, let's say, Minerals Commission, for National Communication Authority, for all those, let's say, GNPC and all those state agencies. That is not the responsibility of Fair Wages. So when we take the entire public sector, the public service workers who are on the single spine and those that Fair Wages have responsibility over. But if you look at the fair wage, those on the single spine itself, the disparities are not so much, especially with regard to the basic, because wherever you are, it was determined by job evaluation. But the problem is the so those on the single spine compared to others who are not on the single spine, and that is where the disparity is.
And then, Prof, when you look at the Article 71 holders, and you look at the public sector concerns, then do we get the understanding that it is no longer the ability to pay, but the structure itself wasn't done well?
Well, I wouldn't say that it is not ability to pay, but I would say that the issue must be addressed holistically. If I go back a bit, when the single spine started, it was quite okay, because if you look at the premium, what they call interim market premium, it was tied to the basic. So anytime the basic goes up, you expect the premium to go up. So the whole thing goes up. And therefore that actually minimizes the possible or the potential disparities between those on the single spine and those outside single spine. But unfortunately in 2013, when that one was made absolute, and that has actually eroded that kind of differences. And that is why we need to start the bigger conversation and look at what can be done. And if we don't take care, what the single spine sought to do will come back, because single spine sought to bring all allowances, categorize all allowances under I think 5 or 6, so that we will not have proliferation of allowances. But where we are getting to, it will get to a point where, I mean, a group of workers on a single span may have about 10 different allowances, while others may have 5 and so on. Then it will defeat the purpose of the single span. And that is why it is important for a national conversation to start in making sure that we come to a point where we see that the disparities are not, and everybody understands.
Since you've spoken about allowances, neutrality allowance, should we go ahead and pay?
Well, I was not there when the negotiation went on, and I wouldn't have been there because I'm not part of them. I think CLOSAC, civil servants, local government workers, I mean, they deserve more than what they are getting. And therefore, anything that will improve their salary, I mean, will be better. As to whether we have to name it as neutrality, that is another.
Maybe professors also deserve an allowance that forces them to the classroom than going to the job field as well. Some would say that.
Well, I think then you can stretch that kind of the conversation to that level. But the by and large is that whether it is neutrality allowance or whatever name that you take, I think civil servants deserve improvement in their salaries.
Yes, they do.
Exactly.
But should you be paid for you staying neutral? Then professors also demand allowance that forces them in the lecture halls.
Yes. So we just have to interrogate where then I wouldn't have called it neutrality anyway. I would have looked at other things that we can use, I mean, we can look at and then give them that allowance. But well, they sat down and said, well, let's call it neutrality allowance. But as to whether it is neutrality or not neutrality, the bigger word there is what? Allowance. The bigger thing there is some improvement in their conditions of service. And I think government knows that. I think they deserve it. That's why government signed the MOA with them. So it is, I mean, the public is now talking about the name, the nomenclature, the name, neutrality, and this. So, but I think it could have been, it is like what we had when the single spine was rolled out. I was saying that be careful in using the word premium, because premium connotes something else. And indeed, it became a problem. Everybody wanted premium here and there and so on. So sometimes when we go to the negotiation table, we should look at the bigger picture and say, whatever we are bringing up, it will not degenerate into some others also asking for the same thing. But as to whether it is neutrality or whatever it is, civil servants deserve something better.
Professor William Bawumia is the head of the Economics Department at the University of Ghana, Legon, as you talk about the economy and the labor front and getting the right pay structure in the public sector. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the economy and developments on the labor front with my guest in studio, Professor William Bawumia. He's the head of Economics Department at the University of Ghana, Legon. And Prof, thank you so much. But as we quickly wrap up on the labor issues and all the rest, I mean, there's a current development on the SOEs, and some are making profits, some are not making profits, and again questions about what some are taking as remuneration. I mean, for you, should be tied with performance-based or what? Because some are questioning the allowances and salaries to some of these SOEs, chief executive directors. What, they are still not making any good profits?
It's not only the allowances. I think it's because we have also politicized our SOEs. I mean, you bear me out. These days, when a new government comes, I mean, all CEOs of SOEs are supposed to put their pens down and leave for new ones to come in. And if you look at appointment of all SOEs, they are partisan political people. And therefore, if you have those people, I'm not saying they are not experts. I mean, some of them may be the best expert, but so long as they are coming from that angle, there are certain things that we cannot, you will not be able to say it, but how do you know that even how much they are being paid, they are also supposed to contribute something to the party?
Yeah.
So in that case, you may think that a CEO of a SOE is taking 100,000, but what comes to him personally may not be the 100,000. So not until we make SOEs more business, oriented SOEs, and appoint professionals regardless of where they are coming from, it will be very difficult for them to make the needed profit that we expect them to.
Should we tie remuneration to profit returns, or?
Yes, and that is what will make them work. You tie the whoever is leading to performance, and then others who are his subordinates. All of them are going to be paid based on their performance, and in that case, we'll be able to measure. If you don't perform well, then you don't also get what you deserve. I think it is something that we can start from. However, the appointment of SOEs should be taken a second look at. Strictly,
just like what happens in the private sector, the board is appointed, the board then goes out, search, give performance targets to whoever heads that, and then we go.
And that for me will work better in many of these private enterprises. That is what they do. And I can tell you, when you go to the private sector, some SOEs are even taking more than what you think the student enterprises are taking. But because what they are taking is tied to their performance, they are able to deliver, and therefore when you pay them, you don't have any problem.
I don't think anybody will complain the profits are good and they are equally being paid the bonuses as well.
Yes, and that is what you find in many of these private enterprises, whether in the banks, whether in the manufacturing, whether in telecommunication. They are paid quite well. But you can also see that they declare quite good profit. And therefore, when they go to the board, they can ask for more. And the shareholders are also happy. But if you have the shareholder, which is government, and the government is making losses, and we still continue to pay them, then it means that we are not doing what we are supposed to do as far as managing our SOEs.
But let's come to the macro issues and let's look at revenue as well. Do you think that we are going to get it right this year again? Or because some are still raising issues about the approach, the models, and all the rest?
Well, I am worried that since November, when the budget was read, we have reduced the discussion of the budget and revenue to only e-levy. And if you look at it, e-levy is expected to give us 6.9 billion, but we are talking about over 80 billion revenue. So I ask myself, why do we have to do that? And the moment we do that, and that has even brought this issue of parliament with fighting here and there and so on, that also, people may not look at that as very important, but that also gave bad signal to investors. And that culminated in investors taking their money, and that also affected the exchange rate, and that is so. I don't know why so yes, indeed, government needs revenue, and I am the last person to say government doesn't need revenue. Government needs revenue because government doesn't work. In the past, where government was directly involved in economic activities, from 1983-84, government has moved away. Even SOEs that we are talking about, we don't expect government to intervene directly. So we expect the private sector to be the engine of growth and to be able to bring the revenue. And therefore, government needs revenue to construct roads. Government needs revenue to pay me, and so on. But the approach to getting those revenue is what sometimes we speak about. Let me talk about the e-levy.
Let's talk about e-levy, because right now the Commissioner General has issued a letter trying to phase the implementation and all the rest. Should we just take it back, look at mid-year, work out all the challenges, and look at from July maybe this year?
So I don't have the figures, and I'm told that the value as at the end of December was about 1 trillion. And we are talking about the value. So I would have loved to know, instead of the value, the number of transactions that occur between 100 cities and 1,000 cities. When we get those figures, you'll be able to know how it will work out. So I asked myself, if Vodafone doesn't charge anything, and then MTN is charging 1%, then it means that if the 1% that MTN is charging culminate into 1 billion, if I were government, I will put a tax on what the MTN is getting out of that. So I can put, let's say, 80% on the 1%. That is 0.8 for a start. Then the MTN would then have to think about whether to put it on the consumer or absorb it. So that will be for a start. And then you see how it goes. But it looked like government has something in mind. I mean, we all spoke about 6.9 billion. So whatever government can do to be able to do that. But mind you, whenever a new thing is coming, in the short run, people will try to move away. But I mean, it will get to its level in the long run. And many people have also said that because of the reaction people have come up with, the digitalization agenda of the government may be, if not totally eroded, it may slow it down. So I think as a country, we could have looked at it, thought deeply into it, start gradually, put it on what the telcos are getting. So you can say, well, the Vodafone is not getting anything, so you just put it on the zero. So it means that if you are transferring on Vodafone, you pay 0.8. So that will be for a start. And in many advanced countries, when there's going to be a major policy like this, they will announce it and it will take effect in 2 or 3 years. So they will prepare the minds of people and so on, look at how it will work, and everything will be put in place. But in Ghana, and this is not for this budget, I mean, since the past 20 years or 22 years since I became a full-fledged researcher, that is what I have observed. The policies, when we are going to read the budget, that is why we say, oh, let's do this, let's do that. We are not able to say within the next 5 years, our revenue generation effort. I think within the first 3 years, I think we should look at this type of taxes. Within the first 3 years, we should look at how we can reduce the exemption and be able to bring more money into the system. Within the first 5 years, this is what we go. So it is a plan that we do. So by the time we get to the 5 years, everybody knows that there is something that may come, and we'll be able to block all the loopholes that will come as a result of the introduction of that levy. But unfortunately, many a time when government brings something on the table, it is in a rush. And of course, politics also plays a major part. Then those in opposition will say, well, I don't think we will allow government, and it becomes a battle between the opposition. And those who are supposed to be the experts are put aside. I think we need to look at how we implement some of these policies. And talking about revenue, there are many other areas that we've spoken about that government can get revenue. And it looked like it has taken so long for it to get there. I think 3 years ago when I met some people who were, I spoke about property tax. And they said, oh, we are digitizing, we are doing this, we'll make sure this and that. House numbering, street, all these are there. But have we been able to roll out? Still, no. Many people are not paying. And even if we are paying, is the money going to where it's supposed to go? You and I will know that many people, and I think viewers are watching us, they can testify that many people are paying property tax by cash. And the moment you pay cash, it will not get to government. The person who is collecting will be the one that will. So can we digitize it to make sure that however small that money is, it gets to its destination and government gets it to do development projects.
Professor William Bawumia is the head of the Accounts Department, University of Ghana, Legon. Time wasn't our best friend. Maybe we need to do a part 2 with Prof, and I appreciate your time so much. Well, also we have to draw the curtain down as you spoke about the economy and the labor front. Have a great day. This is PM Express.